And now, a special high witness report from the field. Uncle Weed, this is the Home Office. Are you there? Are you there? Do you read me? Calling Uncle Weed, calling Uncle Weed. Calling Uncle Weed. Do you read me?
Well, let's make a start then. You ready to hit the road? I gotta tell you, getting ready for this has brought back a lot of memories, but I wrote a few notes here. So let's make a start. So in the early to mid 1990s, I'd gone from the West Coast to East Coast USA, following the Grateful Dead and other hijinks, to Europe, hitchhiking around, picking grapes and being the worst roadie ever, and then disappearing into Amsterdam. Then somehow London to Miami in a drive-away car through the southern tier of USA to Dallas and Salt Lake City. Obviously survived, but just barely. Then ended up in the mountains of Japan working as a mushroom farmer. Then, after another hitchhike around, ended up on the island of Guam on a visa run, which turned into a much longer sojourn. While I was there, I began making and selling hemp cloth products on the island, and back to Japan and everywhere else, importing and exporting, and stepping up as a vocal activist, writing articles, making brochures in English and Japanese, and even making a new thing called a website. Dun dun dun! And in communicating with the extended cannabis community, I saw that there was so much potential for the plant. Legalization seemed right around the corner, and my point of view and voice was somehow needed. So, after Jerry Garcia died in 1995, and things got a little bit weird on these Micronesian islands, I did a little bit more rambling, and then I headed to Washington State to attempt to finish my long-lost university degree at Evergreen College in what's called OlyWa, we call it for short. I quickly met 3 renegades who became my co-conspirators in an ISP, and then soon thereafter met an eccentric Japanese experimental filmmaker. All of these things combined to launch a significant project which eventually turned into the HempenRoad documentary film Cascadia Journey. The subtitle implying that there would soon be other chapters, and we had part 2 ready to go in California and then part 3 in Japan, but, well, lives changed drastically, circumstances remix, and we carry on. Where were you in 1996? Do you remember? I like to play this meditation game where I try to remember where I was, like every, say, birthday or Christmas or New Year's or whatever, going back and back and back. A little mental game. Is it just me? I thought so. So, we made this film, and I showed the film at many festivals and had the great fun of taking out on a tour to screen in places where I'd visited and where we'd filmed and lived, mostly around North American West. Some wonderful experiences, some usual mishaps, but especially memorable was the Portland screening on New Year's Eve, and some great Q&A at that one, and Salt Lake City, where I'd spent quite a bit of time in a previous life, and a friend had really dialed in a great theater with the best audio video production quality I've ever seen my little film in. And shipped the film all over the world. Gosh, it's so great to know that this artifact exists in so many places, where it sits in libraries and was even available for rental at video shops when those existed. Neat feeling. Mostly though, I was happy to capture the people sharing their stories. These were entrepreneurs, activists, scientists, farmers, and folks who'd been sort of thrust into this erstwhile movement from lots of different directions and kind of finding their way through it. Now, about the film, the time the default style for videos was still the kind of the talking heads, 60 minutes talk show with an earnest nodding host. I see. Here's an important question. And then the well-lit guest. Oh yes, I'm an expert on various topics. And we took a very different approach, as you will see. Now, as filmmaking goes, I'm stating the obvious here, but this was done with what's now colloquial called guerrilla filmmaking. We contacted the people that we were going to film and said, we're going to rolling, and let's see what we get. And we ended up with hundreds of hours of footage, which AG, my collaborator, the director and editor, whittled down on here's a couple of geek notes, 200 megahertz overclocked Mac clone computer. For a couple of years, Apple allowed other makers to use their, I don't know, magic stuff with a new software called Adobe Premiere 1.0. And we could edit about 9 minutes at a time, and then it would take an overnight render to be dumped onto a $6,000 9 gigabyte hard drive. What? 9 gigs? And sometimes the render just wouldn't work, and it would have to do it all over again. Then each of those clips would then go to an SVHS tape, and then all the clips, once completed one by one, were assembled on a high 8 tape, which was then the master, and then sent to create VHS tapes with a sweet fold-out cover, which we'll look at in detail, shall we? Now, the High 8 master, and High 8 was a short-lived format that was just like a smaller size videotape. I think it was a Sony proprietary thing or whatever, right? And this was just after VHS had won the Betamax VHS war. Gosh, this is getting a little geeky. But this was the VHS duplication service sent this back to the master, and somehow I had this stashed in a plastic bag here, and the HempenRoad, A Journey into the World of Industrial Hemp, 82 minutes, 1997 HempenRoad Film Project, LLP. Then, once approved, it was made into this awesome box. Now, the great thing is, I still have all the original duplication prints, master prints, for this box layout. So I took my beloved default scrapbook collage style, and then dun 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 dun. And this was made at, oh, you're going to love this. Okay, so here is a drawing of what I had in mind. And this was done at Kinko's, which, before the internet, things were transmitted by photocopies, and those photocopies were often made at Kinko's. And there's actually the name and number of the guy at the duplication facility on this. And here's all my sketches that turned out quite remarkably exactly like this. So, duplicated these, sold them at festivals, sold them online. At the time, selling things online was still difficult to take credit cards and that kind of thing, but we made a go out of it. Sent them out to, at the time, lots of folks, well, still now, folks were doing community access TV programs about hemp, kind of like Wayne's World for hemp, and so sent those out to a lot of places. People bootlegged it, people shared it, people sent in all kinds of great comments, which I'll share some of them later, but it was a real joy. Now, I also want to point out for you typography geeks, this is papyrus font, but at this time I'd never seen anyone use it before, and it was a new thing, so I don't want to hear any jokes about that. So, so for those of you under 40, that's a lot of like geekery of how things worked in the 90s. We had video rental stores and $6,000 9 gig hard drives and VHS tapes. It was a very arduous process, but we went through it, and there was a lot of, you know, sometimes when you're a pioneer, you're a little bit ahead of the style, and some people really didn't get it at first. And as time went on, that style that we use of this sort of digital collage and mixed media, you know, because all the songs were sourced from cassette tapes, which still exist in a box up here. And we used a mix of Super 8, 16, well, I'll tell you about that later. I have to tell you something, though. My dear friend, AG, you know, as things happen, he had some personal changes in his life, and we lost touch a little bit years later, and he passed away. And there was another gentleman called Robert Lunday, which he appears in a little cameo in this clip I'm going to show you today. He had an ISP called hemp.net, and he was a diligent activist and really kind of character who bridged the gaps between these different factions that existed at the time, or forever, about the erstwhile cannabis movement, where there's kind of the ropers and the dopers. Industrial are like this, burn the whole system down. And there's lots to say about that. But I want to say that this clip brought back a lot of memories of working with AJ. We spent a lot of time together in a cramped little apartment bedroom with so much equipment and so much mess, doing all this work and doing the voiceovers. So recently I've chopped the film into some bite-sized chapters focusing on each city, because we went city by city. Vancouver, Victoria, Olympia, Portland, Eugene, and the Olympic Peninsula. Should have had a thing here. And today I'm going to share with you the Olympia clip, because that's kind of where it began and started, and was the virtual home of this project. We even had a mailing address there and a company. Olympia is a fantastically interesting city. It was kind of my accidental hometown for longer than expected. For about 9 years I was there. It still holds a warm place in my heart, as well as some very cold places in my heart. But it's a fantastically interesting state capital. Time magazine called it the hippest city in the West. High Times called Evergreen College the top cannabis college. And that's another story, and I will definitely get to that story at some point. That was also where the Belize drug testing incident happened, which is another great story. And more anecdotes that I learned from my work with both with the hemp lobby and different ISP companies, about the power of simply showing up to legislative hearings, and the folks who show up are the ones that really effectuate how policy is made. There's lots of ways to activate, and there's lots of roles for everyone in whatever medium that they want to work in, but there's really something powerful to showing up there in this strange committee room 73, 78 at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, wearing a jacket and a tie. And it's funny because there are pictures of me with various Washington state governors there at bill signings, and I have the pens around here somewhere, but in all of them I'm wearing the same jacket because it was there at the workshop. Speaking of hemp lobby, one of these days we'll talk about hemp Ed Sokoja in PL Washington, who is a fantastically inspirational and important figure in my world. So today's clip takes place at the Olympia's majestic Capitol Dome with Dennis Peron, a wonderful, charismatic activist up from San Francisco, and he was in the midst of California Proposition 215, which was really what broke the logjam. Now, Dennis Peron was an activist within the gay community in San Francisco. As you know, in the 80s, a lot of people were afflicted with HIV/AIDS. He started compassion clubs with other co-conspirators. But, you know, sometimes the orators are the ones who float to the top, the communicators. And then they passed some, so it starts with community, then it gets municipal, then it goes to state, and then that starts to be duplicated by other jurisdictions, and we saw that happen with Washington. So I'm going to roll this clip, and I'm going to come back and tell you a few more things. So I told you I broke this into little chunks on the computer, and this was no easy task. I have a few people to thank for that. But I'm also going to break my no snacks in the barn rule for this, because I'm going to watch it right through with you and then come back and give you a few points. Here in the barn, I got to be really careful about any kind of like critters and bugs coming in. But, you know, hey, what can I tell you? It's a special day. I have ume and ginger tonic here in the Jamaica mug. This is something that we made here at the house. Ume, like when you go to a sushi restaurant, you get those little bitter, sour pickled plums. Those are umeboshi, and this is using that same fruit. We make it into vinegars and tonics as well as ginger, because it's getting a little chilly here. And I'm getting a bit of a cold. So, you ready for this? We got the HempenRoad sign, I got the box, I got a whole binder of artifacts, a whole stack of magazines from reviews. This is all filled with ephemera from the road. I know you're shocked at none of this. But in the meantime, I'm going to go over to the comfortable chair and let's watch the HempenRoad Cascadia Journey, Olympia, Washington, 1996, on a rainy afternoon at the Capitol Dome, and later in an internet service provider office. A data center.
Folks from a variety of backgrounds realize that current cannabis restrictions are misguided and unjust. Many people face difficult questions like, when a loved one is sick, shouldn't they really have the medicine they need? Well, it seems so, but in most places the authorities routinely arrest and imprison patients, treating the terminally ill like criminals. However, before the overproliferation of costly patented medicines and synthetic drugs, cannabis was a common ingredient in the world's pharmacology. Even Queen Victoria used weed to soothe her ailing cramps. Well, in some states, compassion and common sense are winning, as voters have empowered doctors to act in the best interests of their patients and prescribe cannabis as needed. Now, patients afflicted with cancers, glaucoma, HIV and AIDS, MS, and other ailments can be treated with medical rights and human respect. This is a beginning and a legitimate relief for the thousands of ill people who rely on the soothing, healing properties of this non-toxic herb to make their bodies stronger. Here in Olympia, people from many walks of life have envisioned what hemp can do for their families and leapt into action. Often unlikely citizens running for political office, opening shops, sponsoring local teams, challenging the courts, and outreaching into the community. After all, if you knew about something that could help the planet and sick people, wouldn't you want to tell about it?
She was sick by an ailment that marijuana treats. She may be in the crowd today. She learned from her doctor that marijuana might help. Can you get me some, doctor? She asked. No, the doctor says, I'd lose my license if I did that. What'll I do? The doctor says, do you have kids? Can you get it from your grandson? The doctor was doing the best that he could to help the patient and still be able to work in his profession. But that's not what we want the doctors to tell the patients. We want to change that in Washington. We want to change it.
Marijuana is a dangerous drug. Well, they never really tell us what's so dangerous about it. What's the danger? I mean, we know you get cotton mouth, you get the munchies, you get a little spaced out, a little short-term memory. What's the danger? I know, and you know, that marijuana is a medicinal herb. And I know something else about marijuana, that we have bought into their lies about recreational use, that they have made this up. I mean, they just made it up. We're using marijuana recreationally. What does that mean? What does it mean? And we buy into it when I know that anybody that smokes a joint is doing it medically, that you are doing that for a reason, that a psychiatrist would say that you're having emotional pain, that you are having stress in your life, and that is why you're smoking that joint. You are self-titrating your pain through the use of marijuana. Do not buy into this recreational thing. It is not recreational. We love America, and we hate what's happening to it. We love this country enough to stand up and put ourselves on the line. And when I started that Cannabis Buyers Club, I fully expected to get arrested. I fully expected that I would go to jail. And I fully expected I would have to defend my position for what I was doing. This is enough. You have had 25 years to make this drug problem go away. And all you've managed to do is make things worse. And now you want to put sick and dying people in jail for marijuana. It's enough. You've gone on too far. And so, if I had to leave you with anything today, besides my message of hope, I want you to understand about loving your enemies and understanding them and using your love to counteract their hate and using their hate to show other people what this is really about and using your heart and your love to do something, not just sit around and talk about how much you want marijuana legalized. Do something about it.
It certainly gives people a lot more power to be able to reach everybody that they want to. You know, before you really didn't have a very easy way to get your information out to anybody who was looking for whatever you had to publish. Whereas now you can go and put it on the web and make it freely available to people 24 hours a day, some days a week. You don't even have to be there maintaining it. You just make it available, and people can come and look at it and take what they want. We do have a number of organizations that put stuff up, like Washington Education Network. They've got a lot of good information there. Your own information we're serving up. And that's just part of everything that's out there. But we certainly feel that we want to be able to do what we can to promote the issues that we feel are important, and hemp is definitely one of those.
One, two, three, four. How often do you get to stand in shadow of something green from the sight of bold explorer lands, capitals of state? Weeds grow through fences, vandals kick through doors of hollow gray buildings.
All right, my friends, that was Olympia, Washington, Capitol Dome, 1996, from the HempenRoad. And wow, it brings back a lot of memories for me. Now, there's a little bit more to that Olympia clip. You see at the end as we go down the hill, it takes us to one of the quirkiest things in Olympia, the Procession of the Species parade. But the music in there, like I licensed all the music and have contracts and agreements and all this kind of thing. But weird story, Arrington something, Old Time Religion was his band. At the time they were on an indie band inside to Kill Rock Stars label, which was later acquired by Warner Brothers. So when I posted the clip before, all of a sudden all the algorithms kind of freaked out on it. But when we do a show and tell and a Q&A about this, I'll play that little clip. There's a lot of pieces in the film that are kind of like little toke breaks that I wanted to show the reasons that we're working to legalize cannabis, besides the big picture things, that we're people who enjoy life and we want to celebrate the goodness and the weirdness and the variety of life, which is a part of the reason there's footage of animals and nature and scenery, because these are our communities in which we live. Now, special, in case I didn't say it before, it's really special to me to see the activists just out there hanging out in the rain, holding up signs, putting up their booths. There's some people that I'm hoping to talk to in the weeks to come for their recollections. In those days, listen, little show and tell. I won't keep you too much longer. there were so many different events and activist campaigns and things going on. And all right, let's just go through and see what we see. This is a flyer from a screening at Evergreen College when it because AJ was a film student there, and we put together a cascading film festival. The problem was he invited basically everyone in his class who had made a film, including one called The Steadfast Tin Soldier, National Bank, Soulmates, Untitled, Go West, and Can You Say Clitoris? Then the HempenRoad, and then we had popcorn, live music, ambient trance, Chinese opera performance, Orisi dance performance. There were some drawings, and there was a hostess, live music by Modern Day Inventor, and all kinds of snacks and food and hemp coffee. And so by the time we put the film on, wow, it was like well into the evening. But, you know, since I'm here doing this, here's another poster from a screening at the Midnight Sun in Olympia. That was a much easier going affair. And that was, I got to mention more Hempco. And there's a little clip of them in the video. But I didn't do an interview. Dave Moore had just opened up his shop there, and he's a great character because he's kind of a good old boy, had a great mullet, and he was just selling these hemp things, and he was a huge supporter of my projects. And years later, a few years ago, I was through Olympia, Washington, and now enjoying the legal climate, he has a weed store where you can buy all your usual smokable cannabis forms, and then next door still has his More Hempco. And I went in there and I was quite touched because there was a whole little Uncle Weed tribute display. So special hello to Dave Moore. Here was another screening at Seattle Hemp Fest. Recently I saw Vivian McPeak, who was ringleader of Hemp Fest and played in the Herbivores and all this kind of thing, and Freedom Fighter of the Year. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you that is I'm hoping to get a poster from the official poster from that event. Okay, just a couple more things. Point I wanted to show you is in those days there was a lot going on at the Capitol building, as evidenced here in Axis magazine, yet another one of the many arts and entertainment weeklies that lasted for months or years in Olympia. Hemp World magazine, and I'll read more of these in detail as we share other segments. There's an ad and then a review in here, including a little blurb that says it's downright poetic. There's a surprise around every bend in this trip. On the edge, jazz backs interesting visual effects of melded images. In contrast to innovative work, there are the too fast video shots like we've all taken. And there's at least one moment that is downright poetic, referring to nuclear power plants, oil rigs, and clear cuts as broken promises to the land, the workers, and ourselves. And I broke that segment. Another Hemp World magazine that shows us filming at the Commercial Industrial Hemp Symposium with my buddy Chris, and there's me and AG, and we're there doing our filming. I love seeing this. Also in the same issue that I'm in, an obituary to William S. Burroughs, Propriety and Prohibition, an interview with Dave Olson, that's me, and summer hemp events, the Global Days Against the Drug War, pro hemp event at the Grateful Bread, the Seattle Hemp Fest. There was all kinds of things going on with activism. This again in 1996, 97, it really seemed like we were on the cusp of something. It took a little longer than we expected. But hey, this brings me to almost my final note. Did I mention that this was a mix of 16mm Super 8, analog and digital high 8, early generation digital cameras, and I also learned the lesson of audio is really challenging. Hope to talk to you in the next couple of weeks with some of the people that you saw in this, or do some more Q&A. So if you have any questions about this over the next few months, I'm going to play other clips from Seattle, Portland, Eugene, Vancouver. I just want to start off with Olympia, as Dennis Peron was on my mind the other day thanks to a question from Mary. So finally, I want to say, when I became put myself out there into the world saying I'm a cannabis activist, I'm Uncle Weed, and I'm going to work for these things. I'm not, all my articles I published under my real name, Dave Olson, and I'm out here doing it. Everywhere I've done on TV and radio and all the mainstream media and all the underground media and everything that I've done, I've never shied away from who I am on both sides of my pseudonyms or whatever. And my 3 goals really started with, I wanted to reduce the use of trees, especially clear cuts and old growth, and the use of oil by using hemp to make industrial products. These things are now possible, but strangely enough, of the industrial, recreational, and medicinal side, it's really been the slowest to get going. And the industrial sector has been, the ones that have been most successful, was the one that seemed most challenging at the beginning, which was food products, seeds and oils and whatnot. And secondly, I wanted safe access for people who needed cannabis for medicinal use. We've seen that now in huge examples with children and elders and all points in between. I now deal with a chronic and complex illness, ME/CFS, if you're keeping score. And here in Japan, while certainly it's a very anti-smoking cannabis, THC cannabis environment, we do have CBD shops here and CBD vaporizers and wax, and CBD products are being made locally, which eventually we'll get to this topic more. And third, I wanted people to be able to enjoy cannabis as a leisure time activity for recreational and headspace and meditation and enjoyment of life without risking getting shook down by the police and being thrown into the criminal justice system and all that comes with it. In the U.S., it impacts the student loans, which are a travesty in itself, but it impacts that. It's always on your record. For me, as an international traveler, as soon as you have something on your record, all of a sudden visas and borders become a lot more complicated. And to me, that is messed up. So I sit here today thinking of my friends in Washington State who can, even through the current global health conundrum, get cannabis. They can go purchase safely, use, consume, enjoy, have it delivered in all its forms. Clear cuts are still happening, oil is still being used, and yeah, people are still getting shook down in some places, but I can look at Washington and go back to Dennis Peron's message from that video and say, yes, hope, love, and hope carried the day. Love, hope, honesty. So it's not perfect, but it's sure a lot better. So, dear people of the Cannaverse, that's my spiel for today. Please join me weekly, strongly, and let me know any questions you have about this. Are you creating any kind of projects? Because besides the topic itself of cannabis, I have a whole binder here of all the business development, all the scripting, the releases, all the drawings, and all this stuff. I'll share some of this in the B-roll that you've watched at the beginning, or maybe it's going on there. I don't know. But I would love to hear what you're working on and what's inspiring you. So, with my Olympia beer hat, Sachuda Cottage, Japan, very fondly, your favorite uncle.